Hello and welcome to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith. In the Bible, the story of Noah's Ark is one of the most well-known tales. However, if you look closely, there seems to be a contradiction regarding how long the floodwaters prevailed. Some passages suggest it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, while others imply the flood lasted 150 days. How do we make sense of this? One theory suggests that the 40 days of rain might only refer to the period needed to lift the ark off the ground, rather than the entire duration of the flood. Another intriguing aspect of the story is the prevalence of flood narratives in cultures across the globe. Why do so many civilizations have a story of a great flood? Is it a shared memory of an actual historical event? Do the numbers in the scripture actually show God's divine hand in all of the flood? Now, this is one area where science comes down very strongly as a worldwide flood being an impossible event. And that is true. It is an impossible event in nature. But was it instead a supernatural event? And lastly, does the Bible translation you use help or sometimes even hurt your understanding of this event? So join us as we delve into these questions, examine the evidence, interpretations, and implications. As usual, I'll present a number of different opinions from my research and conclude with my own thoughts. Show notes will include links to all we discuss. Are you ready to dive in? All right, let's learn together. Genesis 7:24 from the New Living Translations. And the floodwaters covered the earth for 150 days. Right, now the problem, as defined by the Big Book of Bible Difficulties, is this. Genesis 7:24 and 8:3 speak of the flood waters lasting for 150 days, but other verses say it was only 40 days. We find that in Genesis 7:4, 12, and 17. Which is correct? Right, the solution, again from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties, and a quick aside, I will refer to a number of chapters and verses here in this solution. They are all from Genesis, so I won't keep repeating the book name. Here's a quote. These numbers refer to different things. 40 days refers to how long the rains fell, chapter 7:12. And 150 days speaks of how long the floodwaters prevailed, 7 verse 24. At the end of the 150 days, the waters decreased, that's 8:3. After this, it was not until the 5th month after the rain began that the ark rested on Mount Ararat, that's 8:4. Then, about 11 months after the rain began, the waters dried up, that's 7:11 and 8:13. And exactly 1 year and 10 days after the flood began, Noah and his family emerged on dry ground, that's 7:11 and 8:14. Okay, now let's begin with a podcast favorite as we take a closer look at the New Revised Standard Version, or NRSV, and its commentary on the Great Flood in Genesis. The NRSV offers this commentary on Genesis 7:24. Though many world traditions speak of floods, there is no geological evidence of a global flood of the sort described here. Close quote. Now that's a pretty firm statement from the NRSV. But what's surprising is that it comes without any footnotes or evidence to back it up. It makes you wonder about the editorial process behind this translation and its commentary. Think about it this way. It's like me saying there's no evidence of gravity because I can't see, smell, hear, taste, or touch it. Clearly, that's nonsensical. We observe gravity by its effects. Similarly, dismissing the Great Flood without any explanation or evidence feels a bit lazy. A little research goes a long way. And the existence of gravity, much like other scientific phenomena, is well supported by its observable effects. This brings us to an important point. Not all Bible translations are created equal. It's crucial to be careful and judicious in your selection of which version to study. Some translations might not provide the depth or accuracy you need, potentially leading to misunderstandings or misinterpretations. All right, now Greg Kokel of Stand to Reason offers an interesting perspective in his March 22nd, 2013 article, Flooded with Floods. He states, it's true that virtually every major culture has a flood story in its folklore. It's curious, isn't it, that there aren't any worldwide fire myths or global hailstone tales mixed in. Everybody talks about the flood, though. Maybe the best explanation is there really was a flood of such magnitude, and it kept people talking for thousands of years. Now, that's a fascinating take, and it's worth pondering. Flood stories are indeed prevalent across many cultures, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the ancient Greek tale of Deucalion and Pyrrha, or even in the stories of indigenous peoples in the Americas. The absence of similar widespread stories about other natural disasters like global fires or hailstorms is notable. So what does this mean? Could it be that these flood stories, dispersed across continents and cultures, point to a shared historical event? Now let's look further at how long the flood rains lasted. There are scholars who argue for 150 days of rain. In a 2003 paper titled Hebrew in Geologic Analyses of the Chronology and Parallelism of the Flood, researchers William D. Barrick and Roger Sigler present a compelling case. They state, an analysis of the narrative as a unit supports a global cataclysmic flood. A natural division of the flood occurs in two main parts, 150 days of prevailing waters and 221 days of subsidence. The purpose of the first 150 days was to obliterate all terrestrial life, including the original continents. Heavy rains were restrained after those 150 days, not after 40 days, when the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped. The significance of the first 40 days is the lifting of the ark off the earth on the 40th day. We find that in chapter 7, verse 17. All right, back to me. This analysis provides a detailed perspective, suggesting that the rains didn't just last for 40 days, but extended to 150 days. According to Barrick and Sigler, the first 40 days were crucial for lifting the ark, and the intense rain continued for a total of 150 days to accomplish the total destruction described. As often as I've read the Genesis account, I had not noticed that the 40 days might refer to the time it took to lift the ark off the ground. Now, this detail adds another layer to our understanding of the flood's duration, but let's delve a little bit further. The MacArthur Study Bible aligns with the explanation found in the Big Book of Bible Difficulties regarding Genesis 7:24 and the 150 days of floodwaters. Here's the quote. These days included the 40-day and night period of rain. The flood rose to its peak at that point, close quote. All right, now this interpretation suggests that the initial 40 days of rain were part of the overall 150-day period during which the floodwaters prevailed. The rain started the process, lifting the ark, and the waters continued to rise, reaching their peak at 150 days. So, we have an explanation that suggests a 40-day period of rain, which culminated with the floodwaters reaching their highest peak at 150 days. But why is this specific detail about 150 days included? It seems a bit odd, doesn't it? I can understand why some scholars might interpret the 150 days as the duration of the rain rather than just 40 days. So, as our longstanding and attentive listeners know, when in doubt, I try to find the answer from the ancient Hebrew text. I found an insightful article on the Bible Ref website titled, What Does Genesis 7:24 Mean? That helps us understand the significance of the 150 days of floodwater. Here's a quote from the article. This verse brings us back to the Hebrew root word gabar, translated as prevailed in the English Standard Version and other versions. It's a word used to refer to a military victory. The floodwaters triumphed, overwhelmed, overcame, or conquered the surface of the land for 150 days, remaining victorious over everything beneath. Those who have witnessed a large river, a broken dam, or a tsunami have seen the immense power of moving water. Water only a few feet deep has the strength to tear down buildings and drown virtually any land animal. According to the Bible, the floodwaters around the ark were never less than 18 cubits, which is 22 feet or 7 meters, above the highest point of land. That's an invincible quantity of water, and nothing in its path survived, as we found in Genesis 7:23. These 150 days include the first 40 days of torrential rain, followed at some point by the end of the water gushing up from below. After this, the waters begin to recede. But for another 110 days, the floodwaters utterly destroy everything in its path, close quote. Now, let's talk translations. For this particular verse, the ESV, which is the English Standard Version, provides a more accurate translation than the NLT, New Living Translation, that I like to use. The New Living Translation translates the Hebrew word gabar as covered. But a clearer translation based on the context is prevailed. This suggests that the floodwaters didn't just cover the land, they overwhelmed it, reaching their highest point in 150 days before they began to recede. This verse also mentions water coming up from below, which adds another layer to the narrative. While we can't precisely determine how long the waters from below surged, it's easier to quantify the 40 days of rain. To me, it makes sense that the rains lasted 40 days, and the waters rising from below contributed to the floodwaters reaching their peak at 150 days. But there's another fascinating aspect to consider here, and that's the mirror of numbers. So let's delve into the numbers associated with the Great Flood and explore their significance. The 40 days of rain and the 150 days of prevailing floodwaters are not just random figures. They indicate a divine orchestration of events. From the website aboutbibleprophecy.com, there's an article titled, "How Long Was the Flood?" From here, you see God in every step, and pay close attention to how God uses and mirrors the numbers 7, 40, and 150 in the flood. Quoting from the article, by the way, in Hebrew, there's a literary device called chiasm, in which a series of statements are mirrored in subsequent statements. Take a look at the chronology of references to the flood in Genesis, and you can see that there is a mirrored or symmetrical structure. The first 5 numbers followed by a mirror of the last 5 numbers, and these are all from Genesis. Chapter 7, verse 4, 7 days to wait for the flood. Chapter 7, verse 10, 7 days to wait for the flood. Chapter 7, verse 12, 40 days of rain. Chapter 7, verse 24, 150 days of the waters rising. Now to the second set of 5 numbers. Chapter 8, verse 3, 150 days of waters retreating. Chapter 8, verse 6, 40 days of waiting. Chapter 8, verse 10, 7 days of waiting. Chapter 8, verse 12, 7 days of waiting. Now that's really cool. Now, much of what we learn and what we'll continue to learn in this podcast series is supported by science when it's practiced honestly and accurately. But remember, God is supernatural, meaning He is outside of nature. Some events, like the creation and fine-tuning of the universe, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and others are supernatural events. Natural explanations simply don't suffice. The Great Flood is similar. It happened, as many cultures attest, but we can't provide a natural explanation for it. In Genesis 9:13, when God placed the rainbow in the clouds, it was His sign to Noah and to all subsequent generations that He would never destroy the earth again with a flood. This tells us right then and there that the event was supernatural. God caused it, and He promised to never cause it again. To me, the evidence leads me to believe the Bible when it says the rains came for 40 days and nights. The Hebrew word gabar, translated as prevailed in the English Standard Version and other versions, offers the best explanation for the waters and the 150 days mentioned in Genesis 7:24. Again, folks, when in doubt, go to the original Hebrew to help you find the best answer. In our next episode, we're going to dive into Genesis 8:1. Did God temporarily forget Noah? You may reach us at our website, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com, or you may reach out to me directly at our email address, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, with any questions, comments, concerns, fits of righteous indignation, or just to say hi. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend or two as well. And also, write a review and give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, or any of your podcast venues of choice. It really does help get the word out about the most amazing book ever written. Again, I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, I wish you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.